courtroom was silent, the air thick with tension. All eyes were on the woman standing before the judge. A black woman with tired eyes, her hands trembling as she clutched her worn-out handbag. The judge, a white man with a stern expression, adjusted his glasses and tapped his gavel. "Miss Johnson," he said coldly, "you are accused of failing to pay $500 in parking fines. Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Miss Johnson hesitated, her voice barely a whisper as she replied, "Your Honor, I didn't have a choice." The judge raised an eyebrow. "No choice? The law does not care about choices. The law cares about responsibility. But was it truly about responsibility or something much deeper?" Flashback to Miss Johnson's life. A few weeks earlier, Miss Johnson had woken up before dawn, as she always did, to prepare breakfast for her two children, Marcus and Lisa. The tiny apartment they lived in was falling apart, with peeling paint on the walls and a leaky faucet in the kitchen. Despite the challenges, Miss Johnson held her head high. As a single mother, she worked tirelessly at a local grocery store, earning just enough to scrape by. Her dreams of a better life for her children kept her going, even when her body ached and her spirit felt broken. It was during one of those grueling weeks that the parking tickets began piling up. Her car, an old beat-up sedan, was her lifeline. She used it to drop off her kids at school and get to work on time, but the city's strict parking laws became her nightmare. "I don't have money to pay for a parking lot," she had told herself. "I'll just risk it this time." That risk turned into a series of tickets, each one more expensive than the last. The day of the court summons. The morning of her court hearing, Miss Johnson stood in front of the mirror, trying to steady her shaking hands. She adjusted the collar of her only formal blouse and told herself, "You faced worse. You can do this." Her children hugged her before she left. Marcus, the older one, asked, "Mom, will everything be okay?" She smiled weakly and said, "Of course, baby. Don't worry about a thing." As she entered the courthouse, the grand walls and the crowd of people made her feel small. She clutched her purse tightly, hoping the judge would understand her situation. The courtroom showdown. Inside the courtroom, the judge looked down at her from his high bench. His tone was icy and indifferent. "Miss Johnson, do you understand the seriousness of failing to pay your fines?" "Yes, Your Honor," she replied. "But I'm asking for a little more time. I'm a single mother, and my income barely covers rent and food for my kids." The judge tapped his pen against the desk. "The law does not care about personal circumstances. The fines must be paid. You have 30 days. If you fail to comply, you will serve a 7-day jail sentence. Case dismissed." The gavel came down with a finality that echoed in her ears. Miss Johnson stood frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief, aftermath, and reflection. As she left the courtroom, her mind raced. What would happen to her children if she couldn't pay the fine? Who would take care of them if she went to jail? The weight of the judge's words pressed down on her chest like a boulder. Outside, people whispered. Some criticized the judge's lack of compassion. Others shrugged and said, "Rules are rules." Miss Johnson drove home in silence, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. That night, as her children slept, she sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of unpaid tickets. Her life had always been a fight, against poverty, against prejudice, against a system that seemed designed to crush people like her. And now, this fine felt like the final blow. Conclusion with suspense. But Miss Johnson wasn't ready to give up. Somewhere deep inside her, a spark of determination flickered. "This isn't just about me," she thought. "It's about my kids, about justice, about showing the world that we deserve better." What would she do next? Would she find a way to pay the fine? Or would she take a stand against a system that seemed to punish the vulnerable? Her story was far from over. Does the law truly stand for justice, or is it blind to the struggles of those who need compassion the most?